Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei become A Zerius? If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. He never really liked this building. All the twists and turns were just made the interior too confusing for him. Eventually the man reached the end of the hallway and faced a set of double doors. Without a moment of hesitation, the devil pushed the doors open and walked inside. On the other side of the door was a large ornate room. Sitting at the desk at the far end of the room was none other than Serzich's Lucifer, one of the current Mao. Upon seeing Zerius, Serzic smiled and spoke. You know Zerius, most people would be considerate enough to knock before bursting into a Mao's office. The Redid pointed out. Zerius casually sat down on one of the chairs, crossed his legs. Well, most people can't say that they known all of the Mao since childhood. Besides, I didn't sense any other magical signatures in here. It's not like you were in a meeting or something. Zerius wore a smirk as he spoke. Serzic chuckled. Well, you've got a point there. Your sensory skills are as good as always. I can still remember how you used them when you, Ajuka and I used to spar. Zerius nodded. Yeah, but that was before the Great War and Devil Civil War. Now you two are stuck in those dead-end jobs of yours and I'm stuck without my old training partners. Hey, now the ex-Grimoire started. You were offered a position among the Mao as well, but you said, and I quote, I have no intention of wasting my life in working for society that's made up of 80% self-righteous morons. Zerius laughed at that. Oh, yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Well, what can I say? The world is full of idiots. I'm better at punishing those idiots rather than convincing them to be civil. The white-haired man put his elbow on the chair's armrest and rested his head in his hand. So Serzic, what did you call me over here for? I'm sure it wasn't just to reminisce about the past. Serzic nodded. Yes, you're correct. Tell me, Zerius, do you remember Rias? Zerius put his hand to his chin in an attempt to remember. Rias. Oh, that's your bratty little sister, right? I would prefer if you didn't call her bratty. The Mao commented. Ignoring his friend's comment, Zerius spoke again. Alright, so what about her? Does she want to talk to me or something? Not quite, Serzic said. You see, as a big brother, I worry. And with my position, I have even more reason to worry, not for myself, but for those I care about. There exists a strong possibility that I'm not going to the human world to keep an eye on your sister. Zerius interrupted, seeing where the conversation was heading. Oh, come on, Zerius, why not? There's a good chance that someone might come after her. Serzic argued. Zerius shook his head. That's a risk you and you parents took when you're allowed her study in the human world. I don't see why I should waste my time going to the human world to watch that spoiled princess. Look, Zerius, I know your opinion of Rias might not be the best, but the Redid was interrupted again. Serzic, this honestly has nothing to do with my opinion of her. I mean, yeah, sure, she's not in my top 10 favorite people, but the fact is I gain nothing by going out of my way to go to the human world and look after her like some babysitter. To stay under the radar I'd have to leave my peerage behind, and I feel like next time they saw me, they wouldn't exactly just let me go for ditching them. That's not to mention how Oigun and Sis would react. They would not be happy. He said the last sentence with a shudder. Plus, what would Grafia say if she found out that you abused your power to give an order like that? Serzic shuddered. Super devil or not, the man was still afraid of his wife. The Mao then looked at his friend and sighed. Fine, I get your point. So, is that it? Zerius asked. Well, actually there is one more thing. You see, there are talks about a possible peace treaty between the three factions. Finally. Zerius had happily exclaimed. It's about time that people realize that the uneasy ceasefire we have going on at the moment doesn't make shit easier for anyone. Plus I'll get to see Gabriel and Penemu more often. I haven't been able to talk to those two in ages. The Redid chuckled, men and their harems. Part 2 of why I didn't become a Mao. The white-haired man commented. Yes, I get it. Anyway, with that in mind, Azazel has sent a request to the devil faction. A red magic circle appeared on the desk and a small stack of paper. Zerius picked the stack up and began reading it immediately. Serzic decided to give a brief description of what was on the paper. Basically, 4 fallen angels along with over 3 dozen stray exorcists from several churches in Japan had not reported into him in a long time. Suddenly, about a month and a half ago, they all suddenly contacted him and had requested him to send a former nun, Asia Argento, to the church in Kuo, a city that he wasn't supposed to have anyone stationed in. He agreed because he wanted to see exactly what they were up to, and the girl arrived in Kuo last week. What's being asked is for you to investigate and, if necessary, prevent whatever those fallen and exorcists are doing. And in the case that they aren't cooperative, how many need to be kept alive? Zerius asked, still looking through the papers. Azazel didn't specify with the exorcists, but he said that it's best to keep at least 2 of the fallen alive to answer some questions. The redeed confirmed. Zerius smiled an evil smile which showed off his sharp teeth. I can work with that. Oh no, Serziches began. You're not going alone. Knowing you, if you ended up getting excited, you'd totally forget about your orders and kill everyone there, leaving no one to be interrogated afterwards. You are probably right, Zerius relented. He would admit that he got a little kill crazy sometimes. After all, it's not like he hadn't lost control before. Don't worry, I'll take a peerage member with me. They'll help me stay out of trouble. He assured. Serziches gave him a critical eye. Alright then, he said after a moment. Well, there's not much else that I need to tell you. Fool Zerius responded. There's just 2 things I have questions about though. And they would be? The Lucifer asked. Zerius placed a stack of papers back on Serzich's desk, facing the red-haired man. He then pointed to the location on the paper. Kuo. The fact that this is happening in Kuo. Total coincidence, I assure you. Serziches said with smile. I just figured that while you were there, you could check up on my baby sister. Serfol would be happy if you said hi to Sona too. Alright, the white-haired man said. Question 2. Why is the date on this from over 3 weeks ago? Serzich's face turned serious. Yes, well, when I asked you to check up on Rias, it wasn't just as a favor. You see, I sent this request to Rias the day after receiving it. She never reported back. So you also have the mission of finding out exactly why she hasn't taken action. The taller man smiled. That seems easy enough. He picked up the papers and began walking out of the room. He was about to exit, but a voice stopped him. Oh, Zerius, Serziches called from behind him. Please don't scare my sister too much. I know how you get. Don't worry about it. The horned man waved back into the room as he spoke, not even bothering to turn around as the doors closed behind him. As Zerius left the room, he began thinking of who he'd bring with him. Let's see, who can I bring? My queen is overkill, so is either of my rooks. Maybe I should bring. Nah, she'd see the whole thing as a waste of time. Oh, I know. The man formed a small magic circle in his hand. The circle was deep blue with a ram's skull in the center. It was a communication circle. He placed the circle next to his ear. Hey Albedo, I need you to meet me outside of the Lilith government building in about 3 minutes. We've got a mission. 3 minutes later. Zerius walked out of the building. As he exited the structure, the man saw the person he was expecting to see. She had long black hair and flawless skin, she had 2 white curved horns sticking out of her head, which matched a white dress that she had on, as well as her long gloves. Her body sported excellent curves and a large bosom that would make any man eager. Her eyes were golden with slit pupils, and she wore a spiderweb necklace that covered her chest and shoulders. When she saw Zerius, a large smile appeared on her face. She immediately ran towards him. Stopping in front of him, she gave a deep bow. Lord Zerius, I have come just as instructed. Zerius waved her off. There's no need to bow, Albedo. But Lord Zerius, one such of yourself always deserves the highest level of respect. A bow should be the bare minimum. She argued. Zerius chuckled. Ah Albedo, well your undying loyalty and devotion is always refreshing and appreciated, it's unnecessary at the moment. This woman was Albedo Baphomet. The Baphomet clan was an extra devil clan had sworn loyalty to Zerius's father centuries ago, similarly to how the Lucifuge clan swore loyalty to the original Lucifer. Albedo had been raised from birth to be completely and irrefutably loyal to Zerius specifically. This loyalty was strong enough that it sometimes came off as obsessiveness. To her, Zerius's whims and desires held more value than her own life. The white-haired man had been working with her for the last couple centuries to change that kindest, but he had minimal success. But Lord Zerius, the black-haired woman, tried to argue. Albedo, it's not a big deal. Anyway, we're going to the human world for a mission. Lead the way Lord Zerius, I will follow you anywhere. I know Albedo, I know. A magic circle formed underneath the 2, and suddenly, they were gone. Duo abandoned church. Zerius and Albedo appeared in a flash of blue light. Zerius looked the same, but Albedo was wearing a new outfit. It was a dark full plate with 3 layers of armor that still managed to show off her feminine curves. In her hand was a black bardage. So, you ready Albedo? Zerius asked. Always Lord Zerius. With your word, I will strike swiftly and without mercy. She spoke through her helmet. The 2 walked into the building. Upon entering the church, Zerius immediately took note of the state of the building. Wow, I honestly thought that this place would have been more worn out. There were no overturned benches or broken windows. In fact, the only visible damage was a couple smashed statue of Jesus and crosses that stood around the room. Hey. The hell are you beepers doing here? Someone yelled. Zerius turned his head to see the speaker. He recognized the face from the files. Wait, don't tell me. Zerius began. It's Freeze, right? The devil attempted to remember the man's name. It's Fried, you shit. Fried Selzen. The gray-haired human screamed. Remember that name, cause it's the name of the guy who gonna hack the shitty devils into little itty-bitty pieces. He then took out a gun and a standard exorcist light sword. Zerius smirked. Alright, let's do this. He was about to step forward, but he suddenly noticed a dark aura coming from next to him. The white-haired devil turned to see Albedo. While the woman was silent, the demonic energy coming off her was anything but calm. Albedo, are you alright? Zerius asked, slightly concerned. I am fine, Lord Zerius. The armored woman spoke with barely restrained fury. But if I may make a request. You may, Zerius answered, curious about where she was going with this. Albedo responded immediately. I ask you, my beloved Lord Zerius, to allow the honor of slaying this vile insect that stands before us and who dares to insult your glorious name. She was screaming by the end of it. Zerius thought about it for a moment. I don't think there's any harm in letting her have her fun. And while she's killing this guy, I can take care of the fallen angels in the basement. Zerius expanded his senses and searched the area for magical signatures. Or maybe not. There's only one fallen in the basement and 3 outside. Bunch of humans down there though. Okay, then change of plans. Alright, Albedo, I'll leave this guy and the human in the basement to you. I'll handle all the fallen outside. Also, there should be a blonde girl with green eyes down there. I want you to bring her to me unharmed. Is that all understood? Zerius asked. Yes, my lord. She answered dutifully. So, are you two peeps done yet? Fried asked. It's less fun cutting up shitty devils if they're not paying attention. They've got to know that they're about to die or they give such sucky reactions. Well, whatever, if I'm fighting the bitch, then it's time for me to slice and dice. He jumped and swung his light sword at Albedo. The armored demon immediately blocked it with her bardage and, using a surprising amount of force from her thin arms, swung her weapon, throwing Fried across the room and into the wall. The force of the impact caused the area of wall that the stray exorcist hit to collapse on top of him. Later, Albedo, Zerius said as her walked out of the building. I have faith in you. He closed the doors behind himself. I will not fail you, my beloved master. Albedo said cheerfully as she looked at her master's opponent, who was getting up for the debris. Ah, you bitch. That hurt. Fried said. Albedo, not giving her target the opportunity to fully recover, charged at him. Seeing her approach, Fried pulled out his light gun. Eat light, you asshole. He then fired several rounds at the woman. He was surprised, however, when each shot bounced off her armor, leaving no noticeable damage. In his surprised state, he was not prepared for when Albedo swung her weapon, cleanly severing his hand left, the hand that was holding his gun. Ah. The gray-haired man screamed in pain and anger. You beeping bitch. That's the hand I jack off with. Without responding to his statement, Albedo kicked Fried in the face, sending him flying into the rows of pews to her side. Fried had released his hold on his light sword from the impact. It clattered to the floor harmlessly. She walked to his downward from her heels clicking against the ground with each step. When she reached his position, she stepped down on his chest. Hard. Beep. Fried screamed as she crushed his sternum. Shut up. Albedo commanded as she added pressure. Disgusting vermin. That's all you humans are. Wastes of space like you should all be exterminated. However, luckily for you, Lord Zerius sees value in you trash that I do not. And his opinion is far more important than mine. Even with her helmet on, Fried could see the cold leer that she was giving him. With a swift motion, the devil swung her bardage, severing Fried's right arm from the shoulder. Weeping God. He yelled as his blood pooled next to him. However, on those occasions when he does allow me the freedom of disposing of you pests, I can honestly say that I enjoy it. She rose her bardage into the air. Wait. Hold on, you bitch. Fried tried to get up, but the force on his chest was too great. With a single swing, Fried Selzen was dead. But Zerius. The white-haired man walked out of the church. Following the magical signatures that he had sensed, he walked behind the building and into the woods. After walking for a few minutes, he got into position. Alright, he said loudly. I know you're all there. Come out already. It was only after an instant that Zerius heard the sound of flapping behind him. Turning around, the man saw 3 fallen angels. The first one was a middle-aged man in a buttoned-up overcoat and fedora. The second was a short blonde girl in a gothic loli outfit. The final one was a fully grown woman in a maroon trench coat and matching miniskirt. Well, it seems like a devil is trying to mess with our plans. The blonde one said. I don't recognize this one. The man stated. Is he another stray perhaps? It doesn't matter. The woman said professionally. Stray or not, he's gotten too close. We should take him out. Zerius looked at the 3 for a moment before sighing. Yeah, I don't have it. What? The girl said in confusion. What are you? Shut up for a sec. Zerius pointed towards her as he cut her off. He activated a magic circle and teleported a stack of papers into his hand. He then began to skim through them. This action evidently angered the youngest of the group. Why you? The little girl created a light spear and got ready to throw it at Zerius. Middle Zerius suddenly said, pointing at the blonde girl again. What the now identified Middle began. The devil continued, ignoring her. Kalwainer the white-haired devil pointed to the woman. Donosiki then pointed to the man in the fedora. How do you know our names? Kalwainer asked in shock. Oh, that's all in this. Zerius shook the files in his hands. Azazel sent me here with a mission. Shut down your little project here. He scratched the back of his head. Well, Azazel didn't send me. Serziches sent me on behalf of Azazel, but you get the idea. Donosik glared at Zerius. Do you really expect us to believe that Lord Azazel would really work with lowly devils? Believe whatever you want. Zerius said. He teleported the files away and begun to do some light stretches. The fact is that I've only been asked to bring 2 of you back alive. In other words, 1 of you is expendable. Who is it going to be? The white-haired devil smirked. Why you arrogant piece of trash. I will have fun killing you. Donosik said as he created a light spear. He charged. Yeah, you show him Donosik. Middle exclaimed in excitement. Amma Donosik, hold back. We need to weigh the situation a bit more. Kalwainer yelled at her comrade. A volunteer. Zerius stated. The fedora-wearing man continued his charge. As he approached Zerius, he pulled his light spear back. When he was only about 3 feet away from his target, Donosik thrusted his weapon forward. He smirked as he saw his spear land right in the center of Zerius's chest. The smirk didn't last long however, as the light spear failed to so much as pierce the white-haired man's skin. Zerius looked down at the spear currently pushing on his sternum. Well, that's disappointing. He said with a light sigh. He turned his head back to Donosik, who was frozen in shock. So is that it, or do you have some kind of special last resort attack I don't know about? How? Donosik stuttered out in shock. It's impossible for a devil to survive an object made of light. Who the hell are you? He shouted in fear. Well, it's not so much impossible. You're just kinda weak. Zerius responded. Grabbed the light spear. With a simple squeeze of his hand, the weapon shattered into tiny motes of light before fading away. There was a moment of silence as the fallen angels took in what had just happened. Retreat. Kalwainer ordered as she made to fly away. The other 2 followed her example and turned around to fly off. Oh, I don't think so. Zerius said. He pointed towards the now retreating trio, his middle and index fingers raised. With a motion of his hand, 3 thorn vines sprouted up out of the ground. Each vine wrapped itself around one of the fallen angels' ankles. The thorns dug into their flesh as the vines tightened, trapping them in place. What the hell? Middle screamed as the vine pulled her back to the ground. In her desperation to escape, she formed another light spear and attempted to use it to cut the vine. Kalwainer and Donosik did the same. All 3 slashed and stabbed at vines in an attempt to sever them, but it was all for naught. The vines were too strong. Seeing that all 3 had been caught and were now on the ground, Zerius decided to speak. Now usually, I'd just kill all 3 of you and be done with this, but again, I'm supposed to leave 2 of you alive so. He looked at Donosik, a bright smile on his face. Since you attacked me first, you get to die. More vines began rising from the ground, surrounding the terrified fallen angel. Wait. Please. I'll talk. I'll answer any question you want to know. Just let me live. Donosik pleaded for his life. The vines stopped. Any question, huh? Zerius asked, surprising all of the fallen. Yeah. I'll answer anything. Donosik said quickly. Alright then. Tell me, Donosik. Either of you 2 can answer in his place as well. Zerius looked at Kalwainer and Middle with an evil smile. Why do people die? Time seemed to freeze as the question was asked. What? The busty fallen angel asked in confusion. Oh come on, you heard me. Zerius spoke clearly and slowly. Why do people die? What reason is there for death? Answer that question correctly and all of you can live. This question shocked all 3 of the fallen. None of them knew what to say. Why do people die? That had not been a question that any of them had been expecting. They were expecting something about Grigori or what they were doing in Kuo. None of the fallen had an answer. Come on, give me an answer. Zerius ordered. If you don't give me an answer soon, I'll have to assume you were lying about answering my questions. In which case, I'll just kill you now. The fallen angels were scared now. They were on a time frame and had to answer soon. Donosik, feeling semi-confident in his answer, chose to speak. Is it? Because they do something wrong. Death is a punishment. He answered. Zerius looked Donosik straight in the eye. The devil smiled, giving an iota of hope to the fallen before him. Nope. He said, crushing any hope that he had instilled. The correct answer is. There is no answer. What? Middle tasked in confusion. It's simple. Zerius began. There is no reason that people die. There's no greater cause. There's no bigger plan. Anyone, innocent, guilty or something in between, can die at any time for absolutely no reason or purpose. People die, it's that simple. The vines around Donaseek began to move again. Just like now. Wait. No. Donaseek screamed at the vines wrapped around him. The vines slowly surrounded the man, forming a cocoon and trapping Donaseek inside. Zerius rose his hand into the air, palm open and fingers spread. The cocoon seemed to follow his movement as it too rose higher into the air, only connected to the ground by the vines that formed it. With one motion, Zerius closed his hand. The cocoon immediately reacted, instantly constricting and becoming smaller and tighter until it was just the size of a basketball. There was no scream, no blood, only the unmistakable sound of bones breaking. Zerius turned back to the two living fallen angels. "Alright, now I'm going to need you two to come with me." They looked at him in pure terror as he approached the two. In front of the church. Rainer flew out of the church as quickly as possible. She was fleeing. She was fleeing from the armor-wearing woman that was currently in the church's basement. The fallen angel had been confident at first. Her opponent was outnumbered by almost 52, it had never occurred to her that her actions could have caught the attention of someone that powerful. Hell, she was pretty sure that the devil in charge of this area wasn't interested in her or her group at all, considering that they've been in Kuo a month already. Up until this point, the Gremory girl had only directly interfered within her plans once. That time when Donaseek had tried to finish the perverted boy off. That boy. Issei Haidu. Rainer would admit that killing him had backfired spectacularly. Not only was he still alive, but now he was part of the Gremory's peerage, and to make things worse, he had unlocked his sacred gear. Luckily, it was only a twice critical, no immediate concern. But that boy seemed very set on getting the nun back. If he actually managed to convince his king to try and save her, then Rainer might have had some problems. That mindset is what convinced her to push up the schedule of the ritual by a few days. But, it turns out that it all been for nothing. About 2 minutes before, an armored devil had walked into the basement in which the ritual would have soon begun. Without a word, she had begun to butcher each and every one of the stray exorcists with frightening ease. Rainer had kept back and observed. Judging from how light bullets and light swords seemed to bounce off of the armor without leaving so much as a scratch, she came to the conclusion that her light spear would not do much better. Taking the opportunity, the fallen angel had fled while the woman was slaughtering all of the stray exorcists that she had gathered. "Damn it," Rainer said as she flew behind the building to meet up with the other fallen angels and try to regroup. 3 months of planning and 1 month of preparation all down the toilet in a matter of minutes. And right before everything was about to finish too. Who the hell was that bitch anyway? "You know," a voice said, causing Rainer to turn her head. She saw a white-haired man that she didn't recognize leaning next to a tree. It's pretty rude to use profanity like that when talking about somebody else's subordinate. Zerius finished, a smirk on his face. "You the hell are you supposed to be?" Rainer shouted angrily as she formed a light spear in her hand. "You know, I would honestly love to answer your question in a long and overdramatic fashion, but it's getting kinda late and I have other stuff to do, so." Zerius snapped his fingers and suddenly 7 vines spurted up from the ground directly below Rainer. In an instant, all 7 vines penetrated her flesh and exited out the other side in a bloody show of power. The vines pierced each bicep, each though, her stomach, her chest, and her neck. Rainer coughed up some blood. "What the?" she began, her body shaking. "What kind of magic?" "Oh, that would be my special plant-based magic that I came up with. I call it Silvus Magnus. That's great forest in Latin, by the way. I ended up using that a lot during the Great War. I even got a cool nickname from it." He walked up to the still barely breathing Rainer. He stopped when he was right in front of her face. Grabbing her hair, Zerius pulled her face up to meet his so she was looking at him. The devil looked her right in the eyes, his smile as wide as ever. "They called me the King of Thorns." As if on command, the last semblance of life slowly faded from Rainer's eyes as they grew dull. "Well, that's that," Zerius said. "I should probably meet up with Albedo." He walked back into the forest. "Now where did I leave those two?" It took only a moment to find the 2 fallen angels that he had left tied up. They were sitting in the ground, unable to move due to the vines constricting both their midsections and ankles. Zerius grabbed the length of vine that was coming off of each of them. Still holding the vines, he walked towards the direction of the church, lazily dragging Kalawiner and Middlet along with him. As he reached the front of the holy building, the armored form of Albedo walked out, an unconscious blonde-haired girl on her back. "Albedo." The white-haired man called out to his servant. She turned her head into his direction. Upon seeing him, the devil hastened her walk as she approached him. "My lord," she began, "I have exterminated the exorcists and acquired the girl. Good job. I've got the fallen angels." Zerius pulled the vine in hand, pulling Calawerner and Middle closer to him. Damn it. Stop pulling so hard. Middle shouted at the white-haired man. Oh, chill out. He responded. Look at the bright side, at least you're not dead. But I can change that pretty fast. Please keep that piece of information in mind. He finished with the same smile wore when he killed Donaseek. Middle stopped talking. So what are you going to do to us? Calawerner asked hesitantly. Zerius looked at her. Well, first we've got to report back to Serzich's, then we turn you over to Azazel tomorrow. You're probably gonna spend the night in a jail cell. He stated simply. Calawerner was silent. Zerius looked at her for a moment. Compared to the other fallen angels involved in the events of this town, she didn't seem quite as vocal with her thoughts, so Zerius had no idea what was going through her head. Though that was partially his fault. Zerius had no problem admitting that he was not very good at reading people. Sure, if he knew them well enough, it was easy, but when it came to strangers, he couldn't tell the difference between someone plotting to kill him and someone needing to go to the bathroom. Lord Zerius, Albedo started, grabbing her master's attention. We seem to have company. Zerius turned. 3 teenagers entered his sight. The first one was a boy with pale blonde hair and gray eyes. He was holding a sword. The second one was a brown-haired boy. On his left hand was a red gauntlet. The third one was the one who caught Zerius's attention. She was a short girl with white hair and amber eyes. She was frozen stiff, fear evident in her eyes. Zerius smiled. Hey, Shirin, it's been a while. Zerius said to the girl. She didn't move. Oh, wait, you're going by Kaneko now aren't you? So if you here, then these two must be part of Little Red's peerage. He surmised. Kaneko still did not react. You insolent child. You will responded when Lord Zerius speaks with you. Albedo stated angrily. Albedo, it's fine. Zerius said. He didn't want to have to deal with his pawn freaking out. Who are you? The blonde-haired boy asked, sword leveled and ready to attack. And how do you know Kaneko? Me? Zerius began. I'm nobody important, just a friend of Shirin's big sister. If you want to fight, that's fine, but my servant and I kind of have other priorities. Servant? The blonde boy said. So you're also a devil. Yep, and I've got orders to take these two fallen into questioning and secure Asia Argento here. Zerius pointed to the blonde girl on Albedo's back. Seemingly noticing her for the first time, the brown-haired boy shouted. Asia. What have you done to her? His overblown reaction caught Zerius's attention. What's with that response? Is she your friend or something? Well, whatever. Don't worry kid. It's not like we're going to hurt her. Just taking her back with us. Like hell you are. The brown-haired boy yelled as he began to charge at the man. Issei hold on. The blonde boy shouted to his comrade. Zerius eyed. Well, this is happening. Albedo, don't interfere. He ordered. The boy continued his charge as he pulled his fist back. Zerius figured that he'd let the boy get a shot or two in just to show him how outmatched he was. But it turned out not to be necessary. Issei stop. A voice ordered from the woods behind Zerius. The now identified Issei halted his punch as he looked towards the direction of the voice. From the woods walked out 2 girls. But you? Issei said in confusion. And Akeno-senpai too. Zerius recognized both of the girls. Ah well, if it isn't Little Red and her faithful Thunder Priestess. I was wondering when you two would come out. Rias and her queen slowly walked towards the rest of her peerage. Rias spoke somewhat hesitantly. Lord Zerius, she began. Not to be disrespectful, but why have you come to the human world? Zerius wore an innocent smile. Well, Serzich has noticed that you were taking longer to do your job than you should have, so he sent me here take care of it. I also have the bonus mission to figure out exactly what it you held up. He looked up at the sky. Though it's getting pretty late and I don't feel like staying here until morning, so I think that I'll finish up part B tomorrow. I'll leave cleanup to you guys. Come on Albedo, let's go back to the underworld. He created a magic circle beneath his feet. Large enough to encompass himself and the fallen angels. Very well Lord Zerius. Albedo answered as she walked onto the circle. She was still carrying Asia. Issei won't having any of it. Wait a minute. You can't just take as he was silenced as Rias rose her hand. Issei, stop. There's nothing we can do. She stated. What do you mean there's nothing we can do? She's right there. I'd listen to your master Issei, was it? Anyway, even if you all work together, Zerius' smile seemed to widen and take an almost evil look. At your current levels, you wouldn't be able to land a scratch on me before I killed all of you. The light of the magic circle grew brighter. Zerius' smile turned innocent again. Anyway, I'll see you all tomorrow. In a flash the 2 devils, as well as Asia and the 2 fallen angels, were all gone. Kaneko suddenly fell to her knees. Sweat was pouring from her face. She was breathing extremely heavily. Kaneko. Akeno said as she kneeled next to her cowhide. The swordsman looked at Rias nervously. But you, who was that? He asked. The red-headed girl and a bead of sweat heading down her brow. Udo, she began. That was the person is the most feared man in the underworld, the son of the first devil, and one of the strongest devils alive. His name is Zerius Satan. Zerius walked out of the Lilith government building. As he did so, he released a sigh. So, fun part's taken care of. Now I've just got to go back to Kuo tomorrow and scare Rias and Sona a bit. That should be interesting. A magic circle formed under him as he teleported away. Zerius appeared in front of his home, the Satan mansion, in a flash of blue light. The mansion, an onyx-colored Western-style palace, was a massive construct, taking up about 3 football fields worth of space and being 6 stories high. The man walked lazily into the building. As he walked in, he was greeted by his queen, Esdeath Partis. "Oh, well, it seems that you've returned, Lord Zerius," she said. Esdeath was a tall, curvy woman with light blue hair and matching eyes. She wore a white general's uniform accented by a matching hat and high-heeled boots. "Yeah, so it would seem," he said. "I've got to go back to the human world tomorrow." An idea suddenly occurred to him. "Why don't you come with me, Esdeath? We can hang out a bit after we do the job. It's been a while since I've explored the human world anyway. It'll be fun," the white-haired man stated. "You mean like a date?" Esdeath asked with a blush. "A date?" Zerius wondered aloud. "Sure, why not? We can go to a fancy restaurant. I'll even book a hotel room for afterwards. You'll have all to yourself for the night." Dottie finished with a grin. Esdeath smiled. "Yes, that would great," she said happily. Zerius chuckled. "Yeah. Anyway, I'll take care of everything. You should get some rest," he stated. Esdeath happily complied as she turned around and practically skipped deeper into the mansion. Zerius watched the woman walk away. "It can be hard to believe that that woman is actually a major sadist," Zerius said after Esdeath left the room. "Oh, there is no need to be coy," a voice said from the other side of the room. "You're the only one who she behaves like that around." Zerius looked in the direction of the voice. He saw a tall woman in a revealing red dress. She sported quite the developed figure. Her pink hair and eyes were accented by the 2 horns sticking out of her head. She was perfectly proportioned with a large bust and round rear end, but also spring a thin waist and strong yet supple limbs. This was none other than Roygun Satan, formerly Belphegor, Zerius's beloved wife. "Roygun," Zerius said, his smile widening. "My dearest wife has blessed her unworthy husband by appearing before him," he joked. She chuckled. "Well, what can I say? I was eager to see you again." She walked up to the taller man. Zerius, without a moment of hesitation, grabbed her by the waist and pulled her in close. In a second, their lips were locked in a passionate kiss. The two quickly became lost in each other's embrace. It was a long kiss. They held the kiss for almost half a minute. When the two finally separated, their lips were still connected by a thin strand of saliva. When the strand broke, Zerius decided to speak. "Well, that's just not fair," he said. "You know I can't resist you." "I know," she responded as took a step back. "I am your wife after all. If I couldn't tempt you, you might get yourself seduced by some low-class gold digger, and no woman that I don't approve of is allowed to experience the beautiful dance of flesh with my dear husband," she stated. Zerius hummed. "As much as I would love to cement our union, I have things that I need to do. So this will have to wait for another time." He gave his wife one more hug before walking away. After a minute of walking, he found himself in front of a simple wooden door. Opening it, he entered a simple room furnished by a bed, a nightstand, and several chairs surrounding a table. In one of the chairs, sat Asia Argento. He figured that since Asia didn't actually seem dangerous or hostile, it would be better for her to stay in the Satan mansion than in a prison cell. Zerius took a seat on the couch across from her. "So Asia," Zerius began. "How has the underworld been treating you up till now?" he asked. She looked away from him. She stuttered. The blonde girl was sweating. She was obviously terrified. What's she freaking out about? Zerius thought before it hit him. I'm like the embodiment of everything she was to it to fear and despise. I'm a devil, a murderer, and to top that off I'm the son of Satan. No wonder she's freaking out. It's amazing she hasn't crapped herself. You don't need to worry. It's not like I'm gonna hurt you. And Albedo or anyone else in this building won't touch you unless I give the okay, which I want. So you can chill out." He tried to calm the girl down. Okay then," she replied quietly. "Good," Zerius stated. "So any questions? I'm sure you must have a couple." Asia sat silently for a moment. After seemingly gathering courage, she spoke. "Well, if I may ask, what was Lucifer like?" she asked quietly, her head down. "I was taught that all devils are evil and cruel, but after meeting devils like you and Issei, I do not know anymore. I think maybe if I knew what the original devil was like. Maybe, it would help me come to a conclusion. Zerius thought for a moment. Well, I guess he was decent enough. The white-haired man stated. He was arrogant as hell though, and he really hated the biblical god for banishing him to the underworld. Though I think he got over that for the most part before he died. But I'm curious, why did you call him the original devil? Asia looked somewhat confused. Well, he wasn't he? I learned that after Lucifer was banished to the underworld that he took the new name of Satan and became the first devil. Is that not correct? Oh, no, Zerius quickly responded. No. That's a common misconception. Satan and Lucifer were two totally separate people. My father, Satan, was the original king of the devils. After Lucifer fell, my father converted him into a demon and made him one of his 6 generals, along with the original Belphegor, Mammon, Asmodeus, Leviathan, and Beelzebub. Lucifer might have held power, but my dad was always at the top. Zerius pointed upward, as if to emphasize his father's position. Personally, I think that rumor about Satan and Lucifer being the same person spread around so much because the church wanted humans to believe that the devil was a child of God to help reinforce how strong God was. Asia asked. Oh, my bad. Zerius said a little too quickly. He didn't know Asia that well, but he did know that she had been through a lot already, and telling a former, yet still devout, member of the church about the death of God definitely was not a good way to lighten her spirits. Zerius decided to change the subject. Anyway, if you want to know about the original devil, then that's my old man. As far as personalities go, he was fine I guess. Zerius stated in a relaxed manner. The guy cared for me, my sister and mother, and he always tried to make sure that we were all happy. However, he had a major flaw. I'd have to say it was that he was never really good at showing emotions. In fact, I don't think I ever saw the guy smile. He also made it pretty clear that he didn't really like God too much. There is one thing he said to me about God that I'll never forget. Zerius leaned forward and placed his elbows on his knees. The look on his face turned serious. He told me, Yahweh and I represent the balance between creation and destruction. As long as the two of us continue to exist, that balance can be maintained. I've never truly understood what those words meant, but they always seemed important. He relaxed as he finished his father's quote. The man then turned to the blonde ex-nun. So, does that help you at all? He asked. Asia still looked slightly confused. I don't think so. Good. Zerius stated. Well, I guess that's enough for pleasantries, back to work. Okay then. Asia agreed. Now I already got all the information that I need from Caloriner and Middled, but I'd like to hear your side of the story for confirmation if you don't mind. Asia seemed like an honest girl, so if the stories didn't match up, it was more than likely on the Fallen's end. Oh, alright, Asia said. She still began to tell her story to Zerius, starting a few weeks ago when Rainer approached her, all the way to when she was knocked out before Albedo picked her up. Zerius put his hand on his chin. Well, everything seems match up about right. All the small discrepancies can easily be explained by Asia being kept in the dark about the fallen angel's true intention for the most part. Also she seems to get along well with Ria's new pawn. That might be worth noting. He thought to himself. Mr. Satan? The girl asked nervously. He hummed. Please, call me Zerius. Mr. Satan just doesn't sound right. The white-haired devil said. Oh, alright then Mr. Zerius. She stated. Well, it's improvement. He thought to himself. What is going to happen to Ms. Caloriner, Ms. Middled, and myself now? She asked. Zerius leaned back on the couch. Azazel said he'd come and pick you all up in a couple of days, but as far as after that. Going by the guy's personality I doubt you're in any kind of trouble. You were being manipulated. As for the two fallen, I can't say for sure what's going to happen to them, but they're definitely in trouble. If that little plot of Rainer's had escalated it too much further, then we could have the Great War Part 2 on our hands. Oh, Asia said in surprise. Was it really that bad? Well, it's unlikely that things would have gotten that far, but that fact that they pulled something like that in the territory of two siblings of Devil Kings means that they were definitely trying to start something. The room was silent for a moment. I'm sorry, Asia suddenly apologized as she bowed her head. Why? The white-haired devil asked in confusion. This all because they were trying to use me. It's my fault. Zerius looked at the girl strangely. He then smiled. The man stood up from his chair and walked over towards Asia and reached his hand out towards her. The blonde girl flinched as his hand approached and closed her eyes. However, she was surprised when she felt his hand gently rest on her head. She opened her eyes to see Zerius looking at her with a smile. Zerius chuckled slightly. You've got a weird sense of responsibility, not at fault, so don't blame yourself. You were just an unknowing pawn in someone else's foolish plan. What you should do is look back on this as a learning experience. That way, it's less likely to happen again. He informed. Ah yes, okay then. Asia said with newfound confidence. A Zerius said as he took his hand off of her head. He then stood up. Well, I'll be leaving you to your own devices for now. See you later. He walked out of the room. The next day. Zerius stood in front of Kuo Academy. Esdeath stood behind him. Her attire now consisted of a grayish-blue suit and skirt. The white collar shirt she wore had a few buttons loose, exposing her generous cleavage. Zerius, on the other hand, was in a grey button-down and black dress pants with a matching tie and shoes. He had used some magic to alter his appearance. His ears were now normal-shaped. His eyes were now white instead of black, and his horns and tail were invisible. The white-haired devil turned towards his queen. Well, you ready, Esdeath? He asked. Of course, my master. She stated with a smile bow. Alright then, Zerius was cut off by an angry some female voices. Hey. Get back here you pervs. You're gonna get it this time. Zerius and Esdeath looked in the direction of the voice to see three boys being chased around by a bunch of girls wielding wooden swords. Zerius hummed as he turned to his blue-haired servant. Hey Esdeath, hold back, I think I'm gonna step in here. The white-haired man told his queen. If you insist. She responded. As the three boys ran by Zerius, he grabbed them by their collars, two in his right hand and one in his left, and picked them up a few inches off of the ground. The three teenagers struggled to no avail to escape from the devil. Come on man. Let us go. The one with glasses pleaded. Those girls are gonna kick our asses. The bald one said. This is bad. We are so dead. The plain-looking brunette pleaded. Zerius looked at the three boys in his grasp. He then looked at the boy in his left hand and his eyes filled with recognition. Hey, you're Ria's new boy toy aren't you? He asked. Issei looked at Zerius again, then the teen's eyes widened. Hey, you're that guy from the other night. He said in surprise. Zerius nodded. He then turned his head to the two other boys in his left hand and tossed them back to the angry girls. Sorry, I'm gonna need to borrow this one for a second. What? Why? One of the girls demanded. Don't worry about it. Just beat on those two for I'll have him in a minute. He waved her off. The girls decided to go along with it and went after Issei's friends, though some of them still kept an eye on Zerius and Issei. The white-haired devil then turned back to Issei as the girls proceeded to beat up the two male teens. Hey kid, I need you to tell Rias that I'll be speaking with her and her peerages in about an hour. Can you do that? Issei nodded dumbly. Sure. Issei stated, but it came out more as a question. Cool, Zerius said before looking back at the group of girls. Alright, he's all yours. He then threw Issei into the mob. Why? Issei yelled as the girls attacked him. 45 min later, Kuo Academy student council room. Zerius and Esdeath sat in two separate chairs across from Sun's desk. The meeting with Sona had gone off without a hitch. It was as expected. He had no real reason to bother even talking to the Citri outside of doing her sister a favor. All, it had been less of a meeting and more of a Q&R of things he could take back to Seraphol. From what Zerius could tell, Sona had been doing her job decently well. It turns out that she and Rias had some kind of agreement when it came to their duties of looking after the town. Simply put, Sona was in charge of most of the paperwork and legal stuff, while Rias was in charge of dealing with any threats in the area, including stray devils and members from other factions entering the territory without permission. All in all, it was a pretty simple agreement. The only fault that Zerius could find in it was that Rias tell Sona whenever she and her peerage took out a threat, and Sona had to constantly relay any order that they might receive to Rias. If one of them didn't do this, it caused problems for the other. Zerius and Esdeath got up to leave. Oh, one thing, Sona. That mission that you received a few weeks ago about the fallen angels, you're sure that you sent it to Rias immediately? He asked. Well, I wouldn't say immediately, Sona began, but it was definitely within 24 hours of receiving it. Rias said that she didn't think they were much of a problem, so she wanted to deliver with them later. However, her view on them seemed to change after they killed a student here. Rias actually happened to reincarnate that student into her pawn. I do say, I'm aware. Zerius stated. Well, I'll be on my way, Sona. He and his queen began walking towards the door. Lord Zerius, Sona began. Would you mind a game of chess before you leave? The black-haired girl asked. The white-haired devil hummed while he thought. Sure, why not? The white-haired man consented with a shrug. Esdeath tried to intervene. Zerius, perhaps USH. Oh, lighten up Esdeath. Zerius stated. What harm could come from a little chess game? 30 minutes later. Sona stared down at the chessboard with an unreadable look on her face. Her peerage looked at the chessboard in utter shock and surprise. Esdeath simply stood behind her master and sighed. Zerius scratched the back of his head as he laughed. Well, it seems that I lost, didn't I? Haha. If one were to look at the board, they would see that Zerius, aside from his king who was cornered by 2 pawns and a rook, he only had 1 rook, 2 pawns, and a knight left. Sona on the other hand had almost all of her pieces, only missing 3 pawns, a bishop and a rook. Sona looked down at the board with a critical look in her eye. She had won surprisingly easily. 3 times in a row. Truth be told, I'm not very good at this game. But that doesn't mean it's not fun to play. Sona was less than pleased. Not good at this game was an understatement. He was absolutely terrible. Sona would wager that even Saji, her least strategic thinking piece, could beat him. She assumed that someone of his renown would at least have a somewhat strategic mind, but no, he just went in metaphorical guns blazing. Well, it's not like it's a big deal. The Satan claimed. Chess is overvalued in modern devil society anyway. This caught the Citri's attention. Overvalued? What do you mean? Well, many devils, especially the younger ones, seem to think of chess like some kind of master battle simulator, but it isn't. Chess is actually really different from actual battle, or even a raiding game. For example, in a raiding game, each piece has their own ability, you won't always know where the enemy is, and all because you have a king surround doesn't mean you automatically win. You see my point? Well, I suppose. Sona relented. But chess is still a good tool for developing a strategic mind. She countered. I guess, Zerius responded. But too much strategy can be a bad thing. Your peerage is a perfect example. Excuse me? Sona said, not liking her peerage being insulted. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to insult your peerage here, but simply put, you have no powerhouses on your team. Zerius claimed. I mean, sure, your team is well balanced, and that's something most devils don't consider, but you overdid it. Without any heavy hitters, your options are limited. Would you mind giving an example? Sona asked incredulously, still feeling like her peerage was being doubted. Sure, he replied. The super devil motioned towards Esdeath. Take Esdeath here. If you had to fight her, how would you beat her? He asked. Sona hummed. Well, I suppose I would. Actually, let me rephrase that. Zerius interrupted. How would you injure her? What? Sona asked. You heard me. How would you injure her? An enemy with ice magic that can rival your sister's, enough durability to walk through any of your normal attacks without a scratch, and fast enough to take down all of you in a few seconds. How would you cause any lasting damage? Oh, Lord Zerius, Esdeath said with a slight blush on her face. I do love it when you acknowledge my abilities. She said. Sona and her peerage were silent. Asaji spoke. Well, I could use my absorption line to drain her magical energy. Zerius finished. With a limited amount of energy that absorption line can absorb at a time, as well as the amount of energy that your body can safely hold, she would notice the line and take you out before you made any significant difference. That being if you got the line to connect at all. Wait, I can drain magical energy with my sacred gear? Saji asked in confusion. Zerius ignored the boy. He then turned to Sona's queen. And before you ask Tsubaki, Mirror Alice takes time to reflect an attack. She could get out of the way well before you reflected the attack back at her. The room was silent once again. Okay, Zerius began, so what if she only had one of the attributes that I mentioned earlier? Would that change things? No one replied. That's what I thought. He then turned back to Sona. The way you've set up your peerages to fight others around your same level, maybe a little higher, but as it stands, you don't have anyone who can withstand a particularly powerful hit or deliver an especially powerful attack, and against some opponents, 1 or 2 good do-or-die hits are all you need. Zerius stood up and walked to the door. Esdeath, I think we're done here, let's go see Serzich's sister. Yes, Lord Zerius. She said as she followed behind him. The man stopped as he was about to walk out. He was still facing the door. However, Sona could almost feel the smirk on his face. Zerius then spoke. I'll leave you with that, Sona. But remember, strategy isn't the only thing that's needed in war. He walked out. The cult research room. Upon entering the room, Zerius noticed something. Where's Shirin? Zerius asked the Grimoire. Kaneko went home. Rias said, stressing the white-haired girl's name. I felt that it was probably best considering how she reacts to my presence. The white-haired man finished. Yeah, that makes sense. Probably for the best. We would want her having a seizure now, would we? He said offhandedly as he sat on a couch. The Kendo walked by Zerius and his queen. Would either of you two like some tea? She offered as she presented a plate with 2 teacups on it to them. Oh, thank you. Zerius said as he took a cup. Esdeath politely declined. So before we get this little session started, any questions? Zerius asked the teenagers, taking a sip of tea. He looked at the cup. This is good. He said offhandedly. Thank you, the Grimoire queen responded. How's Asia? The brown-haired boy asked, concern clear in his voice. Oh, don't worry, she's fine. Zerius stated. She's a little shaken with everything that happened, but she's holding up well. I'll tell her that you said hi. Oh, and one more thing. Zerius said. What? Stop staring at my queen's cleavage before I remove those eyes. To emphasize his point, Zerius pointed his right index and middle finger at Issei. Issei stiffened and turned around. Sorry. He said. Oh Lord Zerius, Esdeath began with a blush, her hand resting on her cheek. You are so manly when you get protective. That so? He asked before turning back to Rias and her peerage. So anything else? The room was quiet for a few moments before Rias spoke. Why are you here, Zerius? She asked. Well, there are 3 reasons for that. Zerius rose one finger. 1. It was a good opportunity to go on a date with my queen here. He gestured to Esdeath. He then raised a second finger. 2. Serziches and Seraphil were understandably concerned with how their little sisters were doing in the human world. Unfortunately for them, they had important work to do, so they asked me to come here because, well, I didn't. He raised a third finger. And finally 3, well, we'll get to that later. Zerius shrugged. But first, hey, you, brown-haired boy. Zerius pointed towards Issei. Issei then pointed to himself in confusion. Me? He asked for confirmation. My name is Issei Haidu. He clarified. Alright then, come over here Issei. Zerius said. Issei looked at Rias for confirmation. After receiving a silent nod from the grimoire, he walked up towards the white-haired man. Now would you mind showing me your sacred gear? There's something I want to confirm. Sure, Issei pulled his arm back and with a punching motion, pushed his left arm forward. Sacred gear. He shouted as twice critical appeared on his left hand. Zerius simply looked at him. So, I've gotta ask what was with the pose and the shouting. The Keno and Kiba chuckled in the background. Issei understandably looked embarrassed as he scratched the back of his head. It helps me focus. I'm still new at this. Zerius shrugged. That's fair I guess. He then grabbed the boy's arm and examined the red gauntlet on it. Yeah, I thought as much. I didn't get a good look at it the other day, but the aura I felt then was a good enough indicator. Zerius spoke to himself as looked at the sacred gear. Ooh, what do you mean? Issei asked in confusion. Clench our teeth. This is probably going to hurt. Zerius gave a quick warning before he began to flood Issei's arm with demonic energy. Ai. Issei screamed in pain as he fell to his knees. Issei. Rias exclaimed as she stood up. The rest of her peerage did the same. We're about to go help him. However, before that they were all forced to their hands and knees by a massive amount of demonic energy. It's in your best interest not to interfere. Esdeath stated as she stood up from the couch. However, if you truly wish to, I'll have fun breaking all of you. She finished with a sadistic smile that put Akenos to shame. Esdeath Zerius's voice called out. There's no need for all that. I'm done. He released Issei, who fell to the floor. Esdeath then stood back down and reined in her demonic energy, allowing for Rias and her peerage to move freely again. The red-deeded girl immediately ran towards her down pawn, who was panting. She looked over him, her eyes stopping on the red gauntlet on his left hand. The sacred gear on Issei's hand had changed form. The fingers were now covered, and the entire gauntlet now had a more dragonic and scale-like design. What did you do? Rias asked the man. It's not that complicated. Zerius stated. I just flooded his sacred gear with demonic energy, forcing it to fully awaken. He looked at the sacred gear. Though it was just a hunch, I'm happy I was right. It's been a while, but I can still recognize the Welsh dragon's presence. Welsh dragon? Issei said as he managed to stand up. The Red Dragon Emperor. Zerius clarified. He's in your sacred gear. I'll leave explaining all that to Rias. But man, you must be weak. Even after being reincarnated into a devil, you still need help to fully activate your sacred gear. Long-eyedness or not, that's kinda pathetic. Zerius told the boy bluntly. Issei looked as if the words had physically hurt him. Hey. Rias interjected, don't you call my Issei pathetic. She defended her pawn. Or what? Zerius asked. You'll sick your brother on me? That's the closest thing to a threat you can give. We both know you can't take me in a fight, and main reason that I came here in the first place was because you weren't doing your job. That immediately shut Rias up. However, it did raise some questions with her new pawn. Not doing her job? Issei asked. What do you mean? Butchu's doing a great job. We've already taken out 2 stray devils since I became her pawn. Issei argued, still too exhausted to raise his voice. Oh, you really have a lot of faith in your master, don't you Issei? Zerius began with a smile stood from the couch. I read your file kid. I know all about you. Issei Haidu. Age 16, second-year student of Kuo Academy, resident pervert and wielder of the boosted gear. Absolutely zero magical and/or supernatural background within your family outside of you being neighbors with a member of the church when you were younger. Due to often being beaten up by the girls that you try to pick on, you have managed to develop a decent level of durability and resistance to pain, but lack any noteworthy skills. Zerius recited. How did you? Issei tried to interrupt, but Zerius kept going. You were killed while on a date with the fallen angel Rainer, under the alias of Yuma Mono about 2 weeks ago. You were then resurrected by Rias immediately after. Is this all accurate? Yeah, Issei responded, clearly not comfortable with remembering his death. Did you ever wonder how Rias got to you so fast after your death? Zerius asked the boy. Zerius? Rias tried to step in. Zerius held his hand up in her direction. That was a question for your pawn Rias. Stay out of this. He then turned back to Issei. So, did you ever wonder? Well, I got a magic circle from her familiar. Issei answered. It was just lucky coincidence. A coincidence, huh? Zerius chuckled. An awful lot of coincidences seem to have happened that day. First, Ria's familiar gives you a flyer with a magic circle the same day that you happen to go on a date with a fallen angel. Then, while you're dying, you somehow manage to activate the magic circle, despite not even having enough magic power to use something as simple as a teleportation circle, even after having your magical reserves be boosted upon your reincarnation. And finally, you just so happen to possess a sacred gear, quite a powerful one at that, within you. Doesn't that all just seem way too convenient? Rias tried to say something again, but this time she was cut off by Esdeath placing a hand on her shoulder. At some point the woman had walked away from her master and behind the red-haired girl. My master told you to not interfere, I suggest you listen. Esdeath whispered to the girl. Rias shivered. The woman's voice was like ice, cold and hard, as if waiting for a reason to end her. Issei didn't seem to notice his king. Well, I guess it was. Beside me dying I mean. If that part didn't happen, the whole thing would have been better. Zerius chuckled. Yes, if you didn't die it would have been better for you, but at the same time it would have been less favorable for everyone else if you had lived. You mean the fallen angels, right? Issei asked. No, not them. Zerius said. Ironically, their plan probably would have gone better if they left you alone. Fallen angels didn't really benefit from killing you, but tell me, who gained something from your death? Issei thought about it a moment before he responded. Well, I guess the only person that comes to mind is Butchu, but that's impossible. Didn't even know about those fallen angels until after Yuma killed me. Issei dismissed a bit too quickly. Well, maybe that's what she told you, but in fact Rias was given official orders to kill that same fallen angel a good week before that. What? Issei asked, clearly in shock. Rias looked away. Yep, Zerius started. She was supposed to take that fallen out well before it killed you. The ones at the church too. The third part of my job here was to figure out why she didn't. Issei turned to Rias. But you. Is he telling the truth? Rias did not meet his eye. Zerius looked towards Rias with a smirk. Well, it looks like I know my reason now. I'll be going. Zerius said as he walked towards the door. But, you really do have a unique peerage, Rias. Every member is extraordinary with their own special ability. I just find it a little too convenient that every single member of your peerages would be dead if they hadn't agreed to your offer then and there. And with that, he left, leaving the Gremory and her peerage in silence. Zerius and Esdeath had left Kuo Academy and we're now walking around town. Zerius Esdeath began. Yeah. Do you really believe that Rias had something to do with her peerage's situations when she reincarnated them? Esdeath asked. Not really. Zerius said. If anything, outside of Issei, it was probably all Serzich's. If I know him like I think I do, he probably just kept an eye on potential peerage members for his little sister. When he saw an opportunity, it was just a matter of putting Rias in the right place at the right time. She probably wasn't even aware that he was doing it. So you did intentionally rile them up. Esdeath stated with a sadistic smile. Oh, come on Esdeath, Zerius began with a smirk, you aren't the only one who enjoys getting others to panic. He stated. But it was also a test. A test? She asked. Esdeath, what would you do if someone told you that I had manipulated and tricked you into joining my peerage? He asked. I'd probably laugh at them before freezing them solid. Esdeath stated after a second's thought. Exactly, Zerius responded with a smile. However, none of Ria's peerage members can say something like that or even give a confident response. I honestly don't care about how she gets her peerage members. Yeah, the way she did it annoyed me, but that's none of my business. What I did in there was instill a feeling of doubt among her peerage. If this causes her peerage to fall apart, well then, it'll show that Ria's never really to actually gain their trust and has just been writing off those life debts, which is probably the case. I'm not trying to insult Rias here, but she's the type of person who can help people forget about their problems, which sounds nice. However, when it comes to actually moving on and getting people closure, it's easier to try to pretend that the issue isn't there and hope that it goes away by itself. He shrugged. Zerius honestly wasn't trying to make Rias out to be a bad person. After all, he wasn't very good at helping people either. The difference was, with as long as he's been around, he couldn't help the ones close to him, he'd feel pretty useless. Either way, after what I did in there, either her peerage will fall apart at the seams, or they'll come together and grow stronger as a group. It's sort of an all or nothing kind of idea. And judging from him, Zerius pointed behind them. As Deeth looked where he was pointing to see Issei running out off school property, tears falling from his eyes. It went off pretty well. The white-haired devil finished. I see. As Deeth stated. Quite well planned. Thanks, Zerius responded with a smirk. I try. But what of the Leviathan's sister? Deeth asked. Oh, Sona. I doubt she knew about Issei, but she's a smart girl. She probably figured it out herself. After all, she didn't look me in the eye when I asked her about that mission. Hell, the chess game was probably meant as a distraction, so I stopped thinking about that before I went over to talk with Little Red's peerage. He turned to his queen. But you can't expect me to believe that I was the only one who noticed any of that. Deeth chuckled. I admit I noticed, but since you didn't say anything, I decided to stay quiet and see what you were up to. She told him. But that's not what I meant. It wasn't? He asked, genuinely confused. Then what were you talking about? I was wondering why you didn't try the same thing with her peerage. Deeth asked. Oh, that's what you meant. Zerius began. Simply put, the main difference between their two peerages is circumstance. He stated. You see, with Ria's peerage, they can be summed up as they got into a situation where they would be dead if Rias didn't come in and save them. But Sona's peerage can all be summed up as they happened to find out about the supernatural world somehow, and Sona found and recruited them. There just isn't much more to look into than that. All of her peerage members knew exactly what they were signing up for beforehand and wouldn't have lost anything if they said no. What I did with Rias wouldn't have worked on Sona because her peerage all know the exact circumstances that led to their reincarnation and because of that don't have any doubts. The Satan explained. Oh, I see. Deeth stated. So even if you tried it on the Citri's peerage, it wouldn't have worked. Zerius nodded. But that's enough of that. I believe that you and I have a date to get to. His smirk changing into a happy smile, he reached his hand out to her, palm up. Now shall we? With no hesitation, Deeth grabbed his hand. I would be delighted. 3 hours later. Zerius and Deeth had had a wonderful date and we're now enjoying time in a hotel room. Zerius was flipping through channels on the television as Deeth took a shower. Zerius heard the water stopped. He looked in the direction of the bathroom and saw Deeth enter the room clad only a towel, which did nothing to hide her curvaceous figure as it clinged to her wet skin. Well, don't you look lovely, my beautiful queen? Zerius told his queen. Well, I tried extra hard. She began. I got so excited when I saw you act so confident with the Grimory's peerage. Zerius pulled her on the bed. He straddled her and kissed her lightly. Well then, you're about to see how confident I can be. He was about to remove his own clothing, but he stopped when a magic circle appeared on the other side of the room. Who could that be? Whoever it is must have a death wish. Deeth said in irritation. They looked at the glowing circle and saw a familiar figure appear. Albedo. Zerius said to the black-haired demoness. This is a surprise. Do you want to join in? I've got no issues with that. Deeth looked less amused. Albedo, why are you here? She asked in an annoyed tone. Lord Zerius, she began. I am sorry to interrupt you. She didn't sound very sorry. But this is important. What is it, Albedo? Zerius asked, becoming slightly more serious. I am sorry, my lord, but Albedo paused for a brief moment. The fallen angels that we captured has escaped. The Lilith Maximum Security Detention Center, aka the Lilith Underworld Prison. A massive structure located in the Devil capital city and made to hold inmates that for whatever reason could not be contained within normal circumstances. The facility was essentially made of 3 separate levels. On the ground floor, level 1 were the warden's office along with the cafeteria, a break room for the guards, interrogation rooms, and the courtyard. Simply put, this floor was mainly for the guards, with lower priority prisoners being allowed to roam certain areas. It was where work got done. On the level above that, level 2, they kept the cells for lower priority prisoners, ones that weren't major threats in terms of power, but had something to offer, whether it be information, political use, or some special trait. That floor was mainly where they kept prisoners of war, along with people they intended to interrogate. Then, underground, they kept the dangerous ones. Level 0, aka Malabulge. That's where they kept the absolute worst of the worst. The ones down there had committed atrocities worse than could be described, and they had the strength to back it up. The prisoners at this level were kept alive solely because of their usefulness. As a testament to that, certain prisoners with good behavior were given opportunities to do jobs in exchange of things like lighter sentences and certain perks. It was essentially a suicide squad mindset. Let them out briefly to do their job, but if things go wrong, precautions are in place to where everything can be blamed on them. Going along with that, most devils had no idea that Malabulge was even real. What little they did know of it consisted solely of rumors and speculation. Zerius, Albedo, and Esdeath teleported into level 1 of the prison. None of the three looked particularly happy. Zerius looked towards his pawn. So, explain to me how they escaped. Zerius began a slight amount of annoyance in his tone. I know they were considered priority prisoners, but we had them in a private holding cell, and neither of them should have been strong enough to get past the guards. He stated. Actually, my lord. Only one fallen angel managed to leave the prison. Albedo explained. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall you said that both prisoners escaped. Esdeath pointed out, irritation clear on her face. Obviously she wasn't happy having been interrupted before she and her master could finish their alone time. Well, I saw that simply saying both of them escaped would be quicker than trying to explain the full situation at the time. Albedo said, sending a small glare towards Esdeath. So you decided to lie to your own king. How unbecoming of a lowly pawn. Esdeath mocked. What was that? I don't think I heard you correctly. Albedo began, gaining a tick mark on her head. Oh, my bad. Esdeath began. Do those two useless horns on your head affect your hearing? I'll be sure to talk louder and slower. She countered, intentionally slowing the later half of her stated down. Albedo narrowed her eyes. My horns are a proud symbol of my estimated heritage, not that you would know anything about familial pride. Pretty big talk coming from a pure-blooded devil too weak to take more than 5 measly pawn pieces. No wonder the Baphomet clan is so small. You all must get killed off like flies in times of war. The blue-haired woman taunted. Albedo gained a tick mark, but she kept calm. The word of a lowly reincarnated devil isn't worth even recognizing. Albedo stated. Reincarnated devil. Is that the closest thing to an insult that you can come up with? How disappointing. The blue-haired woman countered. Though I shouldn't expect much from a spoiled princess like you. Albedo began to lose her cool. Well, I'd much rather be spoiled than a conceited swine that not even her parents wanted. Esdeath frowned. Entitled weakling. Esdeath said with a glare as the area around her began to freeze. Arrogant trash. Albedo said much less calmly as she demonic energy began rolling off her. At this point, the guards around them were beginning to sweat. A couple had already left the room. Enough. Zerius announced, drawing the women's attention back to him. He sighed. We've been over this. If you want to fight that's fine, but what are the rules? The demonic energy coming from the two women receded. It has to be on our own time. Esdeath stated. And? Zerius continued. It has to be in a location where we can't break anything. Albedo finished. But girls. Zerius stated as he began walking deeper into the prison, his 2 peerage members following behind him. And that's why I try to keep those two separated, he reminded to himself. Now Albedo, which one escaped? Actually, I believe that I can explain that. A voice said from behind the trio. The 3 all turned around to the source of the voice. Oh, Makina, it's you. Esdeath said upon seeing the woman who had spoken to them. The woman was young and attractive. She has noticeably large breasts with dark brown hair that was mostly kept in her prison hat, with one lock of hair hanging right of her face. She had blue-gray eyes and sported pink lipstick. Her attire consisted of a dark blue guard uniform, along with a matching hat. Her pants are white and she wore black knee-length, high-heeled boots that are high-heeled. On her hip was strapped a simple cutlass. This was Makina Malakota, head warden of the prison. She was also Esdeath's former student. Makina gave a bow to Esdeath. Hello, teacher, she spoke dutifully. Esdeath sighed. I'm not your teacher anymore. She reminded the woman. You will always be my teacher as long as I continue to use the torture techniques that you taught me. The Malakota stated. She then turned to Zerius and Albedo, bowing to them as well. And greetings to 2 as well, Lord Satan, Lady Baphomet. Albedo simply nodded at her presence. Hey Makina. Zerius began with a lazy wave. Where's your father? He asked. My father is currently on vacation. She stated. Until he returns, I am the interim director of the prison. She explained. Zerius nodded. Okay then. Listen, I'd love to talk, but I think we all need to focus on the matter at hand. He stated. Right. Please follow me. Makina spoke as she walked deeper into the facility. Zerius and his servants followed her. The one who escaped, it was the blue-haired one, Calwerner. She answered. And what about the other one? Middled. Albedo asked. Has she been interrogated yet? I wouldn't have a problem doing it. Esdeath said with a frown on her face. I need to let off some steam anyway. I'm sorry teacher, but in this circumstance interrogation is not an option. Makina said as she led the group through the prison. And why is that? Zerius asked suspiciously. Was she killed by one of the guards? I don't believe so, Lord Satan, but I'm not entirely sure. Makina stated. The group walked into the area of the holding cells. Not entirely sure. Why wouldn't you? Oh. The entire area was a wreck. Aside from the massive hole in the wall, there were also multiple corpses of prison guards and prisoners thrown about. Some had wounds from being impaled up, others were decapitated, etc. The point is there were almost 36 lifeless bodies all over. Zerius and his group walked over to the holding cell that was used by the fallen angels. It was then that he saw something less than pleasant. Oh, yeah, this isn't pretty. Zerius said as he looked at the corpse on the ground. Despite the giant bloody hole in her chest, the chrisman liquid dripping from her mouth, and the now lifeless look in her eyes, Zerius was easily able to identify the corpse as Middled. Zerius knelt down to get a better look at the fallen angel's body. One of the guards reported an intruder. Makina began. I sent several more guards to deal with it. When no one reported back, I came here myself, and this is what I found. Zerius hummed as he examined Middled's corpse. Esdeath, he began without turning around, what's your opinion? Well, if I had to present a guess, she began, I'd say that neither of the fallen that you captured yesterday could do this alone. The intruder probably did this while trying to break them out. She surmised. Zerius smiled as he looked at her. You make good points. He then turned to Makina. Makina, the corpses have been examined, right? He asked. Yes, sir. The warden responded. They all had major burns on their wounded areas, the exception being the fallen angel. She stated. All signs point to it being light-based weapons that were used. Yeah. Zerius put his hand to his chin and thought as he stood up. Middled had some burns on her too, but they're pretty minor. It wasn't the guards who killed her. So who could have done this? Zerius thought. Well, Esdeath began. Most exorcists wouldn't be able to pull this off, and an angel would be too scared of falling to commit this much homicide, so it was most likely a fallen angel, a strong one at that. She said. Albedo continued. The question is, why did the fallen kill Middleton and take Calawainer when they could have taken both? Probably an intimidation tactic. Esdeath said. To show that he or she had no issue killing Calawainer if she do follow orders. Most likely, Albedo stated. Zerius just stared at the two. To be honest, this Kinda investigation wasn't his forte. He was good at breaking things, that was just his nature. Figuring out how something got broken and why just didn't appeal to him. He could contribute a little bit, but he normally wasn't too good at coming up with actual ideas and solutions. The white-haired man was happy that the two members of his peerage with the best deductive skills were with him. While it was true that Esdeath and Albedo couldn't stand each other, practically speaking, they had good chemistry. It was just a matter of having them focus on something beside each other. They could really make an effective team if they just kept their tempers in check. That is possible, yes. Makina stated. But what remains unclear is why Calawainer. What is it about her that makes her worth this much effort? Who knows, Zerius stated. It's not like we have much to go on here. Everyone who saw the intruder is dead. Before he could continue his thought, a magic circle appeared next to his ear. Oh, hold on. The white-haired devil told his servants as he brought his hand to the magic circle on his ear. Yeah. Zerius answered. He was silent a moment as he listened. What the hell? He exclaimed. My lord. What is it? Albedo asked. Makina, you're handling cleanup on your own. We need to go. He stated as a large magic circle appeared below him and his servants. Ah, yes. Makina stated after a moment of confusion. But may I know why? She asked. My home. It's being attacked. He told her. The group of 3 appeared outside of the Satan mansion. They were all decently surprised by what they saw. Fallen angels, hundreds of them, all surrounding the mansion. Damn it, they're wrecking my house. Zerius said in an annoyed tone. Sure, you can look at it like that. Esdeath said as she stepped forward. But I, on the other hand, see it as a good opportunity to stretch our legs. She began building up magical energy, creating a freezing aura around her. I believe we should account for the others, Millard. Albedo stated. You're right. Zerius said with a sigh. Well, let's see. Zerius started counting on his fingers. You 2 are with me, and those 2 are on their own missions, so that's 4. He summed up. What about Albedo began? No, she should be fine. Zerius immediately cut her off. Knowing her, she won't come out of the basement unless I tell her to or someone goes after her down there. If the later case happens, then I'm gonna have to clean out a room of corpses later. Well, I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna order someone to do it, but you get the idea. He looked around. What about everyone else? He looked in the direction of that most of the fallen angels were converging, sending demonic energy to his eyes to strengthen them. Mordred was slicing through fallen angels with reckless abandon. She had even bothered to change into her armor, the only piece on her being the silver and crimson gauntlet on her right hand. The rest of her body was clothed in a white tube top, red jacket, daisy dukes and a pair of black boots. She was a short girl with blonde hair and green eyes. Come on. Give me a real challenge. She exclaimed as she bisected another fallen angel. Nia Kuroka began as she walked through a horde of fallen. Kuroka was an attractive young woman with a voluptuous figure, long black hair with split bangs, and hazel gold eyes with cat-like pupils. On her head rested 2 black cat ears, and coming out of her black and yellow kimono were 2 black cat tails. The Nekomata was surrounded by a veil of purplish mist, and all the fallen around her began to drop to the ground. Mor-chan, you should try to be a bit more elegant. People don't like such a tomboy. Nia the Nekomata goaded the knight. Mordred turned towards Kuroka, irritation clear on her face. What was that, you stupid cat? The Knight of Treachery yelled. You two should remain focused. Another voice stated. The voice came from a man whose entire form is covered in a heavy white and black suit that features a wolf-like design. Long, silver-white hair flowed out of the back section of the helmet. On his back was the sheath for the longsword that he was currently using to decapitate a fallen angel. This was Shirokage, Zerius's rook. We are in the middle of battle. This is not a time to waste energy goading one another. He explained. He caught a fallen angel that tried to charge at him by the throat and slammed him to the ground. You stay out of this, you masked freak. Mordred commanded. No one asked for your opinion. A little bit away from them was a person in a red and black jester's outfit, complete with a standard hat. The person was wielding a large golden scythe, and their was covered by a simple mask that was black on the left and white on the right. He was also short, standing a few inches under Kuroka. The person didn't seem too bothered by the blonde woman's yelling. He simply continued to swing his weapon, killing fallen angels in silence. That was Harlequin, Zerius's second knight. Zerius chuckled at his peerage's antics. Well, they seem to be having fun. Though, I guess it's about time that I interfere. Zerius said as he placed his hand on the ground, preparing to use Sylvis Magna. Before Zerius could use his magic, he noticed something odd. About half of the fallen angels had stopped moving. They were just standing or hovering in place, absolutely still. The still active fallen angels seemed to notice this too. One of the fallen flew over to one of the immobile ones and tried to talk to him. Hey, are you Alri? He wasn't able to finish his question as he was suddenly decapitated by the formerly frozen fallen angel's light spear. What the hell? A fallen angel exclaimed before he was impaled by his comrade. What's happening? I can't control my body. Me either. Somebody help me. It was absolutely anarchy. About a third of the fallen angels had broken formation. They were now flying around, brutally killing the fallen that still seemed to be in control of their action. Zerius looked at the events that were transpiring. Well, would you look at that? He said. It seems that Sis came back. Before he could take greater note of the events around him, a form rocketed out of the mansion and into the sky. It was a man. He had black hair, a pale skin, and pointy ears. His eyes had red sclera and yellow pupils. However, the thing that grabbed Zerius's attention was the man's 5 pairs of black wings. It didn't take Zerius long to recognize that particular fallen angel. Kakabiel. We obtained what we came for. If you are still in control of your actions, then retreat. Kakabiel announced to his troops as he flew off. Taking his words, most of the fallen angels began to flee. Oh no, you don't. You have some questions to answer. Zerius exclaimed as he jumped after the 10-winged fallen angel. He extended his own wings, all 12 of the men flew after the cadre. However, before he could get close, he was cut off by over a dozen fallen angels getting in his way. Protect Lord Kakabiel. One of them commanded. DCH, annoying. Zerius mumbled. He reached out and grabbed the closest fallen angel by the face. He then threw that fallen into the large group of them. As the fallen angels caught their ally, Zerius snapped his fingers. Grow. As if responding to his action, vines suddenly burst from the fallen angel's stomach. The vines wrapped around and impaled him and the other fallen angels in his vicinity. In a giant mess of foliage and gore, the fallen angel corpse fell down to earth. Zerius looked around, but his target was nowhere to be found. Kakabiel had gotten away. Damn it, Zerius said. A bunch of random fallen angels attacking the mansion is one thing, but them being led by Kakabiel is another. The hell was he after? The man descended slowly and landed back on the ground near the mansion. Papa. The white-haired man's attention was taken by something else. He turned his head to the side as something impacted his right leg. Zerius looked down to see a small gray-haired girl hugging his leg. Shuri. Zerius said with a smile. He picked up the girl. My precious little princess, are you okay? he asked the girl. He began moving and turning her to get a better look at her to make sure she didn't have any injuries. No cuts, scrapes, or bruises. The girl was Shuriel Satan, Zerius and Roygun's daughter. "I'm okay," she said. "Mama and Auntie kept me safe." "Auntie? You seem surprised," a familiar voice said. Zerius turned in the direction of the voice and saw a woman walking towards him. "Oh, Lucille, you're back," Zerius said to the woman. "I thought I recognized that particular brand of chaos." Lucille was a tall woman that has long white hair and blue eyes with cross-shaped pupils. On her head sat two black horns which seemed to be made of pure darkness. She had a long blue and black tail with a shape resembling a spearhead on its end. Her skin was pale and flawless pale skin, and she possessed a curvy figure. Her attire consisted of a blue dress, along with matching long gloves and heels. This was Lucille Satan, Zerius's older twin sister. "Well, when I heard that someone decided to attack our home, I had to step in," the silver-haired woman stated. "Though I honestly feel like I might have been unnecessary." "Oh, come on," Zerius began. "Necessary or not, it was fun to watch those fallen butcher each other. You don't see that kind of shit every day." Thump. The moment Zerius finished talking, he felt a hand hit him on the back of his head. "Ow," he said in mock pain. He turned around to see his wife Roygun standing behind him, an annoyed look on her face. "I've told you about using curse words around Shuri," she said as she took the girl out of her husband's arms. "It's okay, Mama," Shuriel said. "Papa doesn't take shit from no one." Roygun looked at her daughter. She then sighed. "I can't help but feel like you're becoming more like your father every day." "I know, it's adorable, right?" Zerius asked with a smile. "Well, I suppose." She gave her husband a light kiss on the cheek. The woman then turned back to her daughter. "Shuriel, time to go to bed," Roygun stated as she walked away holding her daughter's hand. "But what about Papa?" the girl asked as she looked towards her father. Zerius gave a wave. "Don't worry, I'll tuck you in later." "Oh, okay then," Shuriel said. She gave a large wave to her father. "Bye, Papa." They left. "Such an adorable niece I have," Lucille started with a small chuckle. "The most adorable," Zerius said happily. He turned back to his peerage. "Okay everyone, now we what?" Zerius asked upon seeing some of the dirty look a few of his peerage members were giving him. "Nothing," Mordred announced as she looked away from him, a small blush on her face. "It's just, you always are so happy when Lady Roygun is present," Albedo stated. "It's not fair," Kuroka exclaimed. "I can't help but feel a bit jealous," Esdeath stated. "Jealous?" Zerius questioned. "I believe your harem's feeling inferior to your wife," Lucille said with a small chuckle. It was obvious that she was enjoying the situation. "Inferior?" the white-haired man wondered. He turned to the girls. "I don't get it. What would any of you feel inferior about? Every one of you is just as strong and beautiful as her. You're just plain amazing actually," he stated without a hint of hesitation. The girls blushed. "So, is everyone alright?" Zerius asked, looking around. "Yeah, I'm good," Mordred told him. "There's no way I'd get injured from trash like that." "Imfinenya," Kuroka stated. "I seem to be unharmed," Shirokage stated. Harlequin just nodded silently. "Alright then, in that case, all that's left is." Zerius looked around. After a minute of not seeing what he was looking for, Zerius spoke. "Where's Asia?" he asked. Everyone looked around, but no one could see the blonde-haired nun. Zerius closed his eyes and expanded his senses in an attempt to locate her magic signature. He couldn't find her. "Beep," Zerius cursed. An hour later. Zerius had just put Shuriel to bed. Now he was sitting in the main room with only his sister. "Those fallen that we captured. Did they say anything?" Zerius asked. "Nothing useful," Lucille stated. "They were just following orders blindly. A couple of them didn't even know who the mansion belonged to." Lucille was a master of interrogation. Her specialized curse, Macro, could enable her to take full control of an enemy's body, which is how she took control of all of those fallen angels earlier. If she used it the right way, getting others to tell her any information they knew was child's play. If she couldn't get any helpful information from them, that meant they didn't have any. "Great," Zerius said sarcastically. "So we still don't know why Kakabiel would take Asia. He is probably the one who took that fallen angel you acquire as well," Lucille said while taking a sip of tea. "Alwerner," Zerius said out loud. He brought his hand up to his chin, thought about it for a moment. "Actually, yeah, that makes sense. Someone on his level could have pulled a stunt like that off easy," he said. "But then what's the link between the two of them? Outside of the stuff that happened in Kuo, there's no real connection between the two, and if it was about that mess, then he probably would have taken middle too, instead of just killing her," Zerius stated. "It has to be something big. If it wasn't, he wouldn't have gone out of his way to blatantly attack my home." If I had to guess, he probably needed her ability. Lucille pointed out. Argento's Twilight healing is a very strong supportive sacred gear. From what I gather, he probably needs her to heal something. Or someone, Zerius said cryptically. Whatever he's trying to heal, it has to be pretty important to warrant that much effort. But that still doesn't explain what he want with Calwerner. Any ideas there? He asked his sister. Lucille shrugged. Nothing that can be confirmed or supported, at least not without more information. But I do have an idea of where to get that information. She stated. The room stood silent for a moment. Are you going to tell me? Zerius asked his sister. I could, but I want you to guess first. She stated with a smirk. What? You're seriously making me do this? He asked awkwardly. You have to make time for the little things. Lucille told him. Come on, it's something obvious. Zerius, he hummed in thought. Wait, I know. He exclaimed as he stood up. Then say it. Lucille told him. Wonder Twin powers activate. He shouted, pushing his fist in his sister's direction. Come on. This is the part where we fist bump. Then you turn into an animal and I turn into some form of water. Zerius then turned his head and spoke to himself. Actually, can he only turn into water? That's kinda lame. No wonder they were discontinued. Lucille simply stared at her brother for a moment. Brother, considering that your most recent charge has been abducted, I thought that you might be a little more serious. She said while shaking her head. Zerius shrugged. You have to make time for the little things. He repeated her word back to her. Besides, if Kakabiel wanted to kill Asia, he would have done that here, instead of going through the trouble of kidnapping her. I don't think she's in any real danger, at least for the time being. He stated, sitting back down. Okay, so what's your plan? I guessed, so I deserve an answer. Well, I suppose that was a guess, if only an extremely terrible one. Lucille chimed with a chuckle in. Why don't you go ask someone who knows Kakabiel? Talking with Azazel would probably clear most of the situation up. Zerius looked at his sister. You see, that's why you're the smart twin. He stated. Yes, and you're the wonder twin apparently. Lucille jokes. Anyway, I can get you into contact with him. Oh, don't worry about it. Zerius stopped her. Don't you remember, I know his secretary. He smirked as he formed a magic circle in his hand and brought it up to his ear. No might be a bit of a loose term to describe your relationship. Lucille said as she casually sipped some more tea. Zerius shushed his sister. He started talking into the magic circle. Hey Penemu, it's Zerius. Yeah, it has been a while. That is true. Listen, I'd love a casual talk, but right now I need a favor. Zerius teleported himself outside of a large building. The building was pretty boring in design. It was pretty much just a gray box with windows. Though it was pretty boring to look at, it was massive, easily taking up a couple thousand feet of squared space. This was the Jirigori main headquarters. The devil couldn't teleport directly into Grigori HQ. Aside from being a fight waiting to happen, the facility had numerous seals in place to prevent that sort of thing. Security reasons. Unfortunately, Zerius didn't bother to consider the numerous guards posted on the outside of the complex. Halt. One of the guards yelled as he pointed his spear directly at Zerius. Right, of course they have guards outside. Zerius said to himself. This is on me. Within a minute, 4 more guards had appeared and surrounded the devil with their light spears ready. Stay where you are, devil. One of the fallen told him. Seriously? Are you really trying this? Zerius asked. I get the impression that you don't know who I am. Quite. Another fallen spoke. You'll be coming with us. Okay guys, listen, the white-haired man began. I would honestly love to turn all of you into corpses, but I don't have time for this, so I'm just going to go on in. Zerius walked past the fallen angles and towards the buildings. Stop now. One of the guards shouted. Zerius didn't listen as he just kept walking through the group. Fine. You made me do this. He brought his light spear back and prepared to stab at Zerius. What are you all doing? A voice called out. Zerius and the group of fallen all looked over to the voice and saw a beautiful woman standing outside the building. She wore a light violet shirt, black pants and black high-heeled shoes. Her eyes was a dark purple which matched her hair was currently up in a ponytail. The woman was Penemu, Azazel's secretary and one of the upper members of Grigori. This man has an important meeting with Lord Azazel today. She informed the guards. One of the guards spoke, obviously scared of his superior. But Lady Penemu, she cut him off. No excuses. She told them. Just get back to your posts. Yes ma'am. The guards all announced. Zerius watched them as they all ran full speed back to their stations. The white-haired man turned back to the woman. Thanks for that Penemu. Zerius said as he walked up to the woman. I really didn't feel dealing with all that. I owe you one. Penemu smirked. If you put this together with the meeting with Azazel, those little favors you owe me are starting to add up. The two began walking inside the building. Zerius chuckled. Yeah, sorry about that. He told her. How about I take you out to dinner to repay you? She smiled. Well, I think I'd like that. She admitted. Great. Zerius responded. But, we'll have to put a rain check on that for now. How long until the meeting? He asked her. Only a few minutes. She said with shrug. Cool, Zerius stated. Then we just need to sit and talk for a little. He was cut off by the sound of footsteps. Zerius looked to the side to see a man approaching. The man was young, appearing in his early 20s at the oldest. His hair was dark blue, with a single white fringe. His eyes were blue, and they were protected behind a large pair of round form was mostly concealed behind a dark red coat lined with white fur. Upon taking in the man's appearance, a large smile appeared on Zerius's face. Yo, Highland. The devil said to the man happily. How you doing? Oh, He-Man said with apathy, you're here. Alright I guess. Oh, come on Highland. Penemu began. At least try to show some enthusiasm. Why? The glasses-wearing man asked her. He then took some pieces of paper out from his coat. Anyway, Barack will want me to give you these. He handed the papers to her. Later. He began walking away. Wait. Highland, stay for a little while. She tried to get him to stick around. He just waved, not bothering to even turn around, and continued walking. I'm good. Later. He said as he left. Penemu sighed. That boy. I swear, he never listens to me. It's fine. Zerius told her with a light chuckle. Guys like to do our own thing. I'm sure there's just something on his mind. Penemu seemed doubtful. Still, you'd think he'd show at least a small reaction when his father shows up. She said to herself. To say that Highland and Zerius's relationship was strained would be fairly accurate. Due to the high tensions between the devils and the fallen angels, Zerius wasn't around very often as Highland was growing up, mostly stopping in for only short periods of time, usually 1 or 2 days at most, before leaving. The blue-haired boy's half-devil heritage was no secret among Grigori, however only the higher-ranking members knew the details like his father's identity. Regardless, the boy's nature as a half-breed made him a target of bullying as he grew up, something he held against his father somewhat. Zerius couldn't really blame him. Looking back at himself, from Highland's perspective, he saw a father that was in and out, mostly out, who was the source for a good amount of trouble growing up. Not exactly an inspiring picture. There was certainly no animosity between the two, but to say that the two of them had a functioning father-son relationship would definitely be a stretch. Don't get him wrong, Zerius loved Highland just as much as he did Shuriel. He just wasn't able to spend as much time with him. Politics was a bitch like that. Penemu looked down at her watch. Well, it looks like that took just long enough. She turned to Zerius. You can go ahead and go in. She told him. Thanks. The devil replied as he walked towards the door. Zerius opened the door. On the other side of the room, Azazel was sitting at a large desk covered in a myriad of papers. Hey Azazel, Zerius waved to the man as he walked into the room. Hi there Zerius. The Governor General stated. You know, I was pretty surprised when I saw your name on my meeting list this morning. Yeah, well this whole thing was kind of sudden. Zerius admitted. Yeah, if you weren't nailing my secretary, you probably wouldn't be able to get an appointment for a month. Azazel said jokingly. Haha, Zerius gave a well-intentioned but somewhat dry laugh. Anyway, I should go ahead and tell you why I'm here. And so Zerius told him about the new developments with the fallen angels, as well as Kakabiel. I see, Azazel began after Zerius finished. He held down a button on the corner of his desk. Penemu, please reschedule all of my meetings for the rest of the day. Oh, should I be expecting a female guest later today? Penemu joked from the other end of the speaker. Azazel laughed. Not today, I'm afraid. He told her. The man then gained some seriousness in his tone. But in all seriousness, this is important. Alright then. I'll take care of it. She agreed as she hung up from her end. Azazel leaned back in his chair. I had been getting the feeling that Kakabiel was up to something, but I was sure nothing would happen for a while. He said to himself. The man looked to his guest. I'm sorry about the trouble my subordinate caused. Don't worry about it. Zerius waved him off. As long as you pay for the damages to my home and the prison, I won't hold a grudge. Azazel smiled. Well, that seems easy enough. He said. So just send me the bill and I'll take it out of Kakabiel's account. Great. Zerius stated. Just send the money to my sister, she's better with that kind of stuff. I'll try to remember that. The Governor General said with a small laugh. Now there's just one more concern I could use your help with. Zerius spoke. The nun? Azazel surmised. Zerius nodded. Not just her. Kalwarner too. I don't get it. I understand Asia. Her sacred gear can be considered a strong asset. What confuses me is Calawerner. Why would Kakabiel go through the trouble of breaking her out? If it was just meant to be a distraction for me, he could have sent some of his soldiers to the human world while I was there, but instead, he goes through the trouble of breaking into Lilith prison and breaking Calawerner out. There has to be something special about her, some reason that he needs both her and Asia. Well, Azazel began, his hand on his chin. Ability-wise, Calawerner is pretty average. If I had to give a reason that would make her unique, it would have to be no, that impossible. Azazel began mumbling to himself. Even Kakabiel wouldn't be that reckless. But, if that really is the case. The man's odd behavior piqued the devil's interest. You seem to have an idea. Zerius noted. You mind sharing? Well, it's just an idea. Azazel started cryptically. If it's what I'm thinking, then Kakabiel's actions would make sense, but there would still be one major factor that he's missing. Unless he already managed to get it behind my back. If he did, then this is trouble. The Governor General was noticeably on edge, which was weird for him. Okay, well, what's the idea? Zerius inquired. He was beginning to get annoyed by the fallen angel's stalling. Azazel sighed. Well, it might have something to do with Calawerner's father. Her father? Zerius asked. Well, who's that? The Governor General did not answer, simply sitting in his chair with a complicated look on his face. Zerius noticed this. Come on, Azazel, the white-haired man started. It's not like you to hesitate like this. Just tell me. Who's Calawerner's father? Azazel sighed grimly. Her father is Azrael, also known as the Angel of Death. End of the here. So that's it for today's video, guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.